Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
What's up, family? Welcome to the show on a Thursday. Michael Eaves in for ESPN Radio, ESPNU, Sirius XM Channel 80, and the ESPN app. Wherever you are listening or watching us today, thank you so much for joining us. We're set to kick off the 100th NFL season later tonight with the Packers taking on the Bears, one of the most storied rivalries in all of professional sports. But we've got breaking news, and Adam Schefter, NFL Insider, joins us here right now on ESPN Radio with the very latest. Adam, you're reporting that there's drama in Oakland between the Raiders and Antonio Brown. What can you tell us at this hour?
Basically, Michael, Raiders general manager Mike Mayock and wide receiver Antonio Brown got into it, had to be separated, heated words, heated exchange. Antonio Brown's been sent home. The team is planning to suspend him. It's the latest chapter in a summer full of them, with him basically burning his feet in the cryotherapy chamber, him going through the helmet ordeal, him missing team meetings, him going away from the team, him finding a helmet, and now him getting into an exchange with Mike Mayock that looks like it's going to lead to him being suspended for at least Monday night's game against the Broncos. Maybe longer.
And, of course, we saw the social media post by Antonio Brown when Mike Mayock sent Antonio Brown an official letter outlining another fine that he received and some of the comments that Antonio Brown then posted to that letter on social media. And you say they got into it, Adam. I would assume it's some type of heated argument. Do you know if it was face-to-face?
Michael, we are trying to piece this together. Literally, the news is coming in here very recently. And, again, I'm giving you what I know. They got into it. They had to be separated. There were heated words. He's going to be suspended, and basically we're going to see how this shakes out. But it's obviously a very testy situation. The latest drama to a long line of them. A
long line of them, to say the least. Adam Schefter, appreciate the time. I know you're still working on this story. Be sure to pay attention to Adam on Twitter and also throughout the day, because he's going to be on pretty much every show we have today as this news unfolds. Again, Antonio Brown gets into it with general manager Mike Mayock. They have the Broncos coming up on Monday Night Football, but according to Adam Schefter, Antonio Brown has been sent home, and the team, as of right now, is planning to suspend him, whether it's just for that one game or maybe multiple games, but more drama in Oakland. Time now for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. So, again, another chapter in the Antonio Brown saga that is his tenure in Oakland. Literally has not gotten to the first game without the potential of not even playing for his new team. Now, through the years in Pittsburgh, Antonio Brown was always a character, right? And because he was so successful on the field, people enjoyed that character that he portrayed, whether it's a show or that's who he truly is from a personality standpoint. People enjoyed the Antonio Brown character because the things he would say, how he would play, the things he would do. But eventually, as he became more successful and became more emboldened within that Steelers organization, he started to do some things that turned off some of his teammates, some of his coaches, some of the fans, and even people in the media. That is who Antonio Brown has been through his career. And now you have a continuation of that behavior in Oakland. The difference in Oakland versus Pittsburgh, and people will tell you that the reason it got out of control in Pittsburgh is because it didn't get checked, and it didn't get checked early enough. It was too late by the time Mike Tomlin and the organization and some of the teammates tried to rein in Antonio Brown, trying to change some of his behavior. He was too emboldened. He was too popular. He had made too much money. You couldn't tell him anything. So now it's time for him to leave Pittsburgh. But he wants to get paid. So he does all this stuff, raising all this noise to get out of Pittsburgh to go to a team that he'd rather play for, to give him the money he can be the star he wants to be. And all of a sudden, boom, you get the Raiders willing to do it. Because you got John Gruden, his second year as a head coach, trying to come back and relive that glory he had as a Super Bowl winning coach. You have Mike Mayock coming out of the TV booth to become a general manager in the NFL for the first time. Both of those men trying to make a splash. The organization itself there in Oakland, with Mark Davis, about to leave the Bay Area to a new stadium and a new market in Las Vegas. They needed a marquee player. They needed a star. They needed someone to bring attention because as presently constructed, no one believes this team is likely going to make the playoffs, right? So what do you have that's going to make us talk about you this season and get us hyped about the next season? It's Antonio Brown. It's the best receiver in the NFL. He is a star on the field, and he can be a star in the media because of the way he plays the game. And so you take those two things and you overlook the potential headaches. You overlook the potential potholes. You overlook the potential problems that could derail everything you were trying to accomplish by bringing him there in the first place. You wanted him to help your quarterback become a franchise quarterback. But if he's not playing, how's that going to help Derek Carr in week 1? If he's not practicing enough during the preseason and training camp, how is that helping Derek Carr and your offense? The helmet issue made a big fuss just to have people talk about him. Then he was an idiot getting to a cryotherapy chamber with no socks or shoes on. So all that leads to him missing practices and workouts. So, Eaves, he's a Pro Bowler. He's an All-Pro. He doesn't need all those workouts and stuff, man. He knows what he needs to do for his body. He's got one of the best work ethics in all of football. That is true. But it is the pattern of behavior that tells you something else is involved, and that's ego, and it's being told you can do whatever you want to do for the most part of your professional career. And now it's become an issue. So we're all going to sit here today. You're going to call into the Stephen A. Smith Show today, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Or you're going to hit me on Twitter at Michael Eaves, and you're going to say, we all knew this was happening. We all knew this was going to happen. Who didn't see this coming? How did Mike Mayock and John Gruden and Mark Davis not realize who they were signing with Antonio Brown? How did they not know? Right. Everyone's going to say that. So clearly they did know. Clearly they did know. But they thought they could change him, or they thought this situation would be different, or even beyond that, they had a greater goal in mind and they were willing to put up with some minor headaches. What they probably didn't anticipate is that those headaches would be migraines, and they would be constant. They would be ongoing. And just when you thought they started to dissipate, another one would come behind it, and it would be even bigger than the last one. That is what Antonio Brown has become for the Raiders. A never-ending migraine headache. If you've had a migraine headache, you know how debilitating it could be. It affects everything you do. It affects your ability to drive, your ability to see, your ability to even talk to people, right? Antonio Brown is a migraine for the Raiders right now, and Mike Mayock's like, we need to do something about it. So he is going to prescribe his entire team medication. And that medication is suspending Antonio Brown. It's to get him away from that team through the weekend, most likely. Maybe week 2, we don't know. Adam Schefter, again, just starting to report this news, just learned it moments ago before we came on the air, that after that social media post by Antonio Brown where he posted the picture of the letter that Mike Mayock sent him outlining a second fine that the team had handed down to Antonio Brown in excess of $59,000 or $53,000, pardon me. And then Antonio Brown goes over the top like, this is how y'all trying to treat me? The devil is a lie. Everybody got to pay up, blah, 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 blah. Basically acting like a child, a spoiled child who doesn't like being disciplined. Because how often has he been disciplined? How often has he been checked? How often has he been reminded of what is expected behavior of a professional athlete in a working environment? Now, it's not the same environment you and I work in. We have different rules, clearly. Professional athletes have way more leeway in terms of the things they do because of what they do on the field and how much they get paid, the whole thing, okay? It's different. But even in that world, there are rules. There are expectations. And if you are the Raiders and you are trying to build a culture, a winning culture, get back to it one that you had for decades. You have an idea of how it should be done, and you want it done a certain way. And if the guy is not living up to those expectations, you have to take action. Now, let's go back, though. The Raiders, they were standing by Antonio Brown all the way through, right? With the helmet. John Gruden came out publicly saying, hey, man, personal choice. Guys want to feel comfortable. We're supporting him, da-da-da. He was behind him. He was saying all the right things. Even when it came to the feet, even when it came to the frostbite on Antonio Brown's feet that occurred not because he was doing some off-season excursion climbing Mount Everest, it's because he went to a cryotherapy chamber without socks or shoes or anything covering his feet. John Gruden went out publicly and said that wasn't even his fault. That is how far John Gruden was willing to go publicly to support Antonio Brown. And what did that get John Gruden? It got him a suspended receiver by the name of the same guy he was supporting, Antonio Brown. That's what he was doing. He was supporting his guy publicly, saying all the right things because he knew the value that Antonio Brown would bring to his team. And John Gruden is all about wins and losses right now. That's what he's about. Wins and losses. The quicker he wins, the better it is for his ego. He's got the money. It's not the money. If he fails as a coach, a network would hire him in a heartbeat. He would be back on ESPN 2 days after he was fired or decided to retire, whatever. So it's not about the money for him. It is literally about his legacy and his ego. He's about winning. He knows Antonio Brown can help him do that. But eventually it got to a cost. And Mike Mayock, back on, was it like August 18th, 16th, 17th, something like that, was like, he was starting to get fed up with Antonio Brown. Exactly. You got to be all in or you're all out. One of the two, right? And all of a sudden you get a series of events after that. Boom, he gets fined. Boom, all of a sudden it comes out publicly. Boom, Antonio Brown says something publicly about that fine. And all of a sudden he's starting to isolate himself from the team and things of that nature. And then finally Mike Mayock says, no, can't do it. There are 52 other guys here that we're trying to look after. We've got to nip this in the bud right now. And so going into week one, the Raiders may not have their best player. Their best player. Not even a question. Their best player may not be able to even play week one with his new team. That's where the Raiders are right now after going through all that drama in the offseason to get him away from the Steelers, to pay him that $30 million guaranteed. Speaking of the $30 million guaranteed, we're going to take your phone calls, 888-729-3776. Hit me on Twitter, at Michael Eaves, filling in for Stephen A today on the Stephen A. Smith Show. If he is suspended for conduct detrimental to the team, that could put his guaranteed money in the balance. Yes. The way contracts are constructed, it could be that a suspension would void the guarantees. And so the Raiders, honestly, would be able to potentially cut him at any point and owe him nothing further, if it is indeed suspension for conduct detrimental to the team. Now, you could go back and say, well, how do you prove conduct detrimental to the team? Who couldn't make that case right now? A freshman law student can make that case right now. Hell, a bartender could make that case right now. An accountant, an Uber driver. Anybody could make the case that Antonio Brown has been detrimental to his team through conduct over the last four weeks. Anybody could make that. So he goes through all of that trouble to get out of Pittsburgh, to go get new money from another team and a fresh start and a whole deal, and he acts a fool, and it could cost him his money. Could cost him his money. Because he could be suspended for conduct detrimental, which would void the guarantees in his contract. I mean, they could literally do it right now. They could say, you know what? Forget the suspension. We're cutting him. And he would get like $1 million, I think. Is it worth it if you're the Raiders? Is it worth to just go ahead and cut him? Because aren't you concerned how he might respond after this suspension? Or if you're Mike Mayock, John Gruden and company, Mark Davis, the owner, are you willing to say, you know what? He's never really been checked before. He's never really had the discipline that he probably deserved in the past. So let's give him that wake-up call and see how he responds. If he responds the right way, it was worth that one game. If he doesn't, then we know what we can do. We can literally cut him, and it won't cost us anything, maybe like $1 million. But my question to you is, do you think this wake-up call will work for Antonio Brown? Do you think this is the thing that makes him wake up? Now, depending on where you grew up, I'm going to go out on a limb and say there was one person you knew, either classmate, friend, family member, that was just, as my mama would say, hard-headed. You couldn't tell them nothing, right? They had to experience something for themselves despite numerous people telling them otherwise, that, yo, this is how it should be. This is where you messing up. Stop tripping. Get your stuff together, or you're going to be out of something, out of a job, out of this house, out of the school, what have you, right? Just a straight-up knucklehead, hard head, can't tell him anything. Antonio Brown is a hardhead. He's hard-headed. You can't tell him anything because everything in his life that he's overcome told him he wouldn't be successful, right? Where he grew up there in the Miami area, how he grew up there in the Miami area, and all of a sudden, he's a multimillionaire, right? So all the things in his life that told him he couldn't do something, and he overcame those things, then why would he necessarily listen to someone telling him what he can't do? Because sometimes you can't tell the difference between criticism and hate. Sometimes you can't tell the difference between criticism and support. Antonio Brown is hard-headed. You can't tell him anything. He has to experience it for himself. He has to experience it for himself. Is this suspension the wake-up call that he needs, and also the wake-up call that will work? Again, we had Adam Schefter on the program moments ago saying that Mike Mayock got into it with Antonio Brown and that the team is thinking about suspending him for this first game. Source tells ESPN's Josina Anderson that Brown and Mayock got into an argument during Wednesday's practice, and it happened in front of the team. So this wasn't just in the office somewhere or in a corner of the locker room or in the training room, sequestered someplace away. Practice in front of the whole team. Now, again, we don't know how long this suspension will be. 1 game, 2 games, 3 games. But here's some context for you. According to the NFL's collective bargaining agreement, a player can be suspended a maximum of 4 weeks for conduct detrimental to the team. So it's up to the league to determine, it's up to the team to determine how long a player should be out based on conduct that is detrimental to the team. So I asked if this suspension is the wake-up call that Antonio Brown needs. Is 1 game enough? Should it be 2 games? Should it be 3 games? What do you think Antonio Brown needs to change his act? And if you are the Raiders, what are you willing to do? By Derrick Rose, NBA player, former Rookie of the Year, former league MVP, went through 2 devastating knee injuries and some other issues during his life, but still loved the game so much that he's willing to play it in any role for a team that will have him right now and be successful in that role. Derrick Rose is going to join us next here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPNU. Michael Eaves in for Stephen A. today. That's coming up. I want to hear your take on the NFL. I want your favorites for the upcoming season. I want all of that today. And I know you have stuff to say about Antonio Brown. We're going to get to it. I promise you. But I don't want to focus on Antonio Brown too much today because we're supposed to be talking about good stuff. And here he is with his behavior once again, sabotaging what should be a fun day for a lot of NFL fans, sabotaging this radio show because we had plans to do other stuff today, but here we are talking about Antonio Brown because that's what we have to do. I want to hear some positive stuff about the NFL today. Throughout this, we're going to get some with Damien Woody. I promise you on that. I want some from you as well. And also Derrick Rose is going to bring some enlightenment to the show in some other regards. We're not talking about Antonio Brown. That's all coming up. Stephen A. Smith Show here on ESPN Radio, ESPNU. Hey, folks, if you're sending your kid off to college this fall, remember that there's one thing college students need more than books or pencils or instant noodles. That's money. And you can send it with Zelle, a quick and easy way to send and receive money right from your banking app. It's easy to use, and the money you send with Zelle goes directly into your college student's bank account, typically within minutes if they're already enrolled. That way they can pick us. They're the Cowboys. Same way we talk about the Patriots. Same way we talk about all the great teams and all the great leagues. We talk about the star players and the star franchises. We were going to talk about Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott and that Dallas Cowboys squad regardless of this situation with Ezekiel Elliott. So if you really think they got a certain amount of money worth of advertisement and attention out of Zeke holding out and waiting to the last week, you're fooling yourselves. That's not how it works. We talk about stars. You talk about stars. That's who you talk about on social media. That's who you call into sports talk radio shows and talk about. That's what you tune into for television. We talk about stars. The Cowboys are one of the star franchises in all of sports. We were going to talk about them going into the season. We were going to say how they were the favorite to win the NFC East. And if things fall right, maybe they can go to the Super Bowl. We were going to be having those exact same conversations. But as it related to when or whether Ezekiel Elliott was going to sign a contract, Cowboys just wasted everybody's time. They wasted their fans' time. They wasted local media's time. They wasted their teammates' time because the teammates had to answer questions about Ezekiel Elliott on the regular. They just wasted everybody's time because the inevitable happened. The best player in the league has the richest contract at his position. That's what happened. Now, as I promised, we're going to talk more about the contract specifically with Josina coming up later because, you know, it's 6-7 years, could be $100+ million, da-da-da. The only numbers that really matter, as we know, in current NFL contract talk is the guaranteed money. $50 million for Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley with 45.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
All right, family, we are still rolling here on a Thursday. The Stephen A. Smith Show presented by Progressive Insurance, making it easy to bundle your car and home insurance. Michael Eaves in for Stephen A. today. You can hit us up at Say ESPN. That's 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Michael Eaves. I'll get to some of those comments in a moment. We're going to be joined by Derrick Rose momentarily, talk about his new book and also some other basketball-related topics. But I do want to take you back to the news of the moment right now, and that is the Raiders planning to suspend Antonio Brown prior to their Week 1 game against the Broncos in Monday Night Football. Adam Schefter joined us earlier on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Raiders general manager Mike Mayock and wide receiver Antonio Brown got into it, had to be separated, heated words, heated exchange. Antonio Brown's been sent home. The team is planning to suspend him. It's the latest chapter in a summer full of them, with him basically burning his feet in the cryotherapy chamber, him going through the helmet ordeal, him missing team meetings, him going away from the team, him finding a helmet, and now him getting into an exchange with Mike Mayock that looks like it's going to lead to him being suspended for at least Monday night's game against the Broncos, maybe longer.
That was Adam Schefter joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show just moments ago. Josina Anderson also reporting that the confrontation, the argument between Mayock and Antonio Brown actually happened on the practice field in front of the entire team. More on that story coming up later here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News, the Stephen A. Smith Show. But joining us now is former NBA Rookie of the Year and also former NBA Most Valuable Player. And he's got a new book out right now that you can get on Amazon and other fine book retailers. I'll show you. Derrick Rose joins us here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Yo, D. Rose, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me on your platform.
Hey, no problem, man. When I was told that you were putting a book out, Derrick, I have to say my first response was that I was surprised because you have been a very low-key guy your entire career, both professionally and personally, and to write a really compelling book, you have to be expressive and you have to share things you probably weren't comfortable sharing in the past. So what compelled you to write this particular book?
You know, I wanted to tell my story in my own words. In the past, I felt like I was too young. I wasn't mature at the time to actually tell my story the way that I wanted to, or to combat the criticism that I was getting at the time. Like, I wasn't ready for that at the time, but now that I'm in year 12 and I see that I have a huge fan base and they all just want the insight on things that I do on an everyday basis or whatever it is. That's why one of the reasons I put out the documentary like a couple of months ago. Right. And now I put out a book out of nowhere. It's something that I just wanted to add to my resume and my portfolio.
You know, I've not read the entire book, Derrick. I'll admit that, but I've read some snippets from it. And one of the things I noticed that you talked about is telling your own story, and you felt as if at times the media, maybe especially the media in Chicago, wasn't not only telling your story, but also leading fans to believe a certain narrative about you that you felt was not true. Let me ask you this, though. How much do you think that had to do with the fact that you were pretty introverted throughout your career, and you didn't share a bunch of yourself with the media and fans, and they were able to think about you however they wanted?
No, that's true. But at the same time, I knew that I was going to have this day or a day that I was going to be able to tell my story my way. And it ended up being 12 years later. I think that I had time to really think about everything, reflect on just my life, the situations that I was in early on in my career, and just learn from them. Like, I felt like I mended all the relationships that I had, like from Chicago. I'm able to, if I really wanted to go back there and work out there in their facility because they have the best facility in Chicago. And New York, I still have a good relationship with Steve Mills, my agent, and him talk damn near all the time. Cleveland, after they cut me and my friend was in the gym that same night after they released me because the team was on the road, and they were on the road for like 5 days. We were up there the four out of the 5 days until they came back. Then we moved to Cleveland State, and Kobe let us do that. So I felt like I did a great job with mending all those relationships, even through the ups and downs, and it got me to where I am right now.
Derrick Rose, former NBA Most Valuable Player, joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show at ESPN Radio. Michael Eaves filling in for Stephen A. today. You mentioned a couple teams there, Derrick, where you got cut. And I mentioned you were a 3-time All-Star. You were MVP. You had the Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals, a chance to go to the NBA Finals. You had the devastating injury. You had another knee injury. You've had 4 surgeries in a very short period of time, and you get cut by some teams. You were on the ascension, Derrick, to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, that is not hyperbole. That is, and I'm sure you knew that as well. And all of a sudden, you have these injuries and these heartbreaks and these personal or I should say professional failures getting cut by these respective teams. Going through all of that, Derrick, what were those moments like for you, and did some of those days become really dark?
Of course. I felt every emotion you could think of, but to talk on the Hall of Fame thing, I am a Hall of Famer, and not in everybody's eyes, but to the people that I grew up with. Like, I made it, I executed, I got to where I was at. I've been having these same expectations I have now. They were thrown on me in 6th grade. I achieved all that. I got through all that. Imagine like being 12 or 13, and everywhere you go, people are like putting like their burdens on you. Like, man, you're going to be the one to make it. You know what? You have, like, you're going to be the one, Shorty. You the one. You're like, what? Like, when I was younger, I used to always, like, pray a lot because when people used to say things like that, I felt like they were jinxing me. And it was just a weird position to be in. And now, looking back at it, I was just happy that I had the mentors I had. I was open and vulnerable enough to talk to people when it was uncomfortable, and I got through it.
What did it take you to get to that point, Derrick, that you were comfortable talking about things that previously made you uncomfortable to discuss?
I think my mom, like being around her, we tend to, like, we're very independent.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have tough times or go through tough times, we shut everybody out, and we feel like we could handle everything ourselves. And I think I got that from her, where during that time, I never worried about basketball. My problems were always, like, off the court, like with, like, friendships.
Right.
Like, I had one of my friends tell me that he had to step away from me because of, like, because we were in a hot seat at the time. And at the time, I didn't or why you stepping away now? But those were the things I was worried about, not basketball.
Derrick Rose has a new book out called I'll Show You. You can get it on Amazon and other fine book retailers right now. Former MVP with the Bulls and played for several different teams throughout his career, especially as of late. So what makes you still want to keep playing basketball, Derrick, at this point?
You know, I had to change my perception. Like, of course, I love the game. When you're in the game and you learn the business, for someone like the way that I grew up, you learn the business side, and it like draws you back a little bit because you start to see that you just see the business side of it. And my perspective had to change because I had to change it had to go from me actually, like, purely just loving the game to understand the game to I'm solely only doing. And I thought about how he wouldn't be able to, like, come to the games before, like, to shoot around with me, to work out with me before the games. Like, I was taking that away from him, and I was being selfish. And I had to grow up, basically, and just stick it through.
What was rock bottom for you?
Rock bottom,
yeah.
I would have to say, like I said, I never worried about basketball. It was always just friendships and going through turmoil with just being in Chicago, going places, people talking there. It was just a lot to go through in your hometown.
I'm going to ask you a little perspective and advice for someone else. Dwight Howard just rejoined the Lakers for a second time, and he recently said that he hit rock bottom, and that changed his perspective on things. And, you know, when you say that term, it can mean so many different things for different people, whether it's career-wise, personal-wise, what have you. For Derrick Rose hitting rock bottom and continuing on in a pursuit of still playing basketball or being the support for his family, what advice would you give Dwight Howard, who's now in a somewhat similar position, trying to do the same thing basketball-wise there in Los Angeles?
I will have to say be patient.
How hard is that to do, though, Derrick? How hard is it to be patient considering who you were, or who you are, pardon me?
I'm saying everybody's different, though. To each his own, but I'm saying for me, my advice to someone else, like, or I didn't know at the time that I was going through everything that my biggest, like, blessing was my calmness. Like, I always wonder, like, man, like, I'm in this profession. I have to be an extrovert. I have to be social. I have to do all this stuff because this is required. I'm thinking this is what's required from me.
Right.
But little did I know. Everybody had to do this, or everybody's fatigued this way. It's little things that you know, so that's why I say maturing. Like, I didn't know nothing about that introvert, extrovert stuff. Like, little things like that helped me a long way to understand who I was as a person, as a man, and as a black man.
What did this book do for you in terms of writing it and be able to express yourself and get certain things out? What did this moment do for you?
It was solely for my fans. You know, I have a huge fan base.
Yeah, you do.
Everywhere I go, I have people that relate to me or just get a feeling or a vibe from me from some way, somehow. And I never opened up to anyone like the way that I did or like I'm doing right now. And this is just a little insight on who I am as a person. I feel like I'm a very complex person. You could put everything in a book by wanting to give you a visual. That's why I put out the documentary. I'm giving you a book so you'll be able to read it, and you never know what the future may hold because I have a lot of content.
Derrick Rose, the name of the book is I'll Show You. He has a documentary called Pooh, which people in the neighborhood, that's what they've called him since he was a kid. You can go to Amazon right now and pick it up, and also some other fine retailers around the country. I'll Show You by Derrick Rose. Derrick, appreciate the time. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Stephen A. Smith Show, and best of luck next season.
Thanks for having me on your platform.
All right, brother. Appreciate it, man. Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPNU. You can join the conversation, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. We will get back to the Antonio Brown discussion. Adam Schefter was on with us earlier. The team is thinking about suspending him going into week 1. They open up Monday Night Football, the second game of our doubleheader on ESPN against the Broncos. And Adam Schefter is also reporting that there's a thought prevailing around the league right now that the Raiders could even go as far as cutting Antonio Brown because they could do it based on conduct detrimental to the team, and they would not be on the hook for that $30 million in guaranteed money. That's all coming up next on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Hey, when it comes to hiring, you don't have time to waste. You need to get your short list of qualified candidates fast. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an... He missed a walkthrough on August 22nd. He'd already fined him some money for missing something earlier. But instead of just one, I don't know why he would post it on social media other than the fact that he's Antonio Brown. But then this is what he says on the post, Josina. Antonio Brown says this: when your own team want to hate, but there's no stopping me now, devil is a lie. Everyone got to pay this year, so we clear. What is this fool doing?
So, first of all, I'm sure Mike Mayock is looking at that message like, wait a minute, so I'm hating now?
Exactly.
I'm hating? Okay, so that's one. And then number two, he's like, wait a minute, who's the devil in this equation? Am I the devil?
Yeah. And who's lying?
Number two.
Where are the lies in
like
this letter?
It's like, right. It's like number three. I am the one that's trying to give you $30+ million in guarantees, right? So, like, wait a minute. What is going on here? What I think is very potentially sad about the situation is that you hope that this doesn't create a significant rift between him and the general manager, or is the beginning of a rift that, can widen, because obviously nobody appreciates being put on blast. Obviously, although Antonio Brown, to his, side, felt like he doesn't understand where those fines are coming from, because if you watch Hard Knocks, you can tell that he feels like there's a rapport between him and John Gruden, and John is expressing to him that he understands what he went through with the helmet controversy. He's behind him. They seem on the same page. The helmet issue seems behind him. He just got a big endorsement. Everything seems behind him. And then it's like, wow, then you mollywop me with this, these fines. So where is that coming from?
Right.
But at the same time, this is coming from a GM that had previously already set an ultimatum about him needing to get this issue done and taken care of and starting to show up. And at the same time, a GM who's trying to set a precedent in his first year of tenure of general manager in terms of how he's handling star behavior. Now, do those fines sometimes get waived, Michael?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Of course you do.
Remember when Marshawn Lynch held out, the Seattle Seahawks waived his fines. So Antonio maybe thought he was going to get the same treatment and obviously did not.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
All right, we're almost at the top of the hour here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPN News, Sirius XM Channel 80, and, of course, the ESPN app. I'm going to take some of your phone calls at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Also, hit me up on Twitter as well, at Michael Eaves. Matter of fact, let's go to a phone call right now. Let's go to Michael in Florida. Mike, you're on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Yo, Michael, how you doing, man? And also shout out Stephen A, man. I listen to the show every day.
Cool.
Yo, okay. So, AB, is this an episode of Last Chance U? Like, that's how I feel with AB. And I think he's an incredible talent. But, dude, you have the potential to make so much money. Be humble. Sit down, man. Be cool. You know what I mean? How you going to prove yourself without Big Ben? I feel like there's a lot of pressure on him.
Mike, I appreciate the call. Here's what you have to understand. Sitting down and being humble is not what has made who came from very poor conditions, a multimillionaire. It makes sense. But I'm telling you, if you didn't grow up that way, if that's not what made you successful, that's typically not how it's going to play out. Hey, folks, be sure to prep your engine for winter with Pennzoil Synthetic Motor Oil, the first motor oil made from natural gas, not crude oil. The proof is in the Pennzoil. Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL GM, one of our colleagues here now at ESPN, we talk about the potential that the Raiders could not just suspend Antonio Brown, but cut him entirely and not owe him that $30 million in guarantees. So here's the deal. The significance of the suspension, according to Tannenbaum, and also some of the language we were discussing earlier here, is that $29+ million in contract guarantees. If he's on the active roster on opening day, his $14.6 million 2019 salary becomes guaranteed because he's a veteran, okay? Now, here's the difference. They could suspend him and then release him. And then that way they would owe him nothing in terms of guaranteed money. The Raiders, in all likelihood, according to Mike Tannenbaum, would probably try to recoup that $1 million signing bonus as well. So all this stuff from Antonio Brown could literally cost him all the money that he fought so hard to get by trying to get out of Pittsburgh. All that money could be gone because he's been a knucklehead, because he's hard-headed, because you can't tell him anything. Because he's only going to do things Antonio Brown's way, even if it flies in the face of the organization that paid him the money to begin with. And that's why so many people have such a hard time rooting for Antonio Brown, coming to his defense in any regards because of these things right here, because of what he did in Pittsburgh to get out and how his career in Oakland was starting, and it may not even start because of those antics. Coming up next, Damien Woody joins us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, and also still taking your phone calls, 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Michael Eaves in for Stephen A. on a Thursday.
Coast. The Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, hour number 2 here on a Thursday. Michael Lee. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. Commercial insurance through Progressive's Protect Your Business and Your Dream. Choose from over 30 coverage options at progressivecommercial.com. Joining us now here on the Stephen A. Smith Show is ESPN NFL analyst and longtime NFL player, Damien Woody. Woody, I know from a former player standpoint that you guys probably feel the most juice as a former player on the opening night, opening weekend of the NFL season. Do you still have that when we get to the first real games?
Man, I am pumped right now. I'm pumped because the whole offseason we've been dealing with speculations of what teams are going to look like.
Right.
We've been dealing with everything, holdouts, all those type of things. But now we finally get to the games that matter. So, like all other fans, I'm excited to see what's going to happen tonight.
All right, so there's so many intriguing storylines around the NFL. If you're an NFL fan or just a fan of a team, there's so many things you could point to that would make you want to watch a certain game, a certain team, what have you. Let me start at the top, okay? Because Vegas has the Chiefs as the favorite to win the Super Bowl this year. Patriots are up there. You got the Saints, you got the Rams, the Eagles, everybody in the mix. But if you watched that AFC title game last year, most people felt that the Chiefs were better than the Patriots and was one penalty that cost the game. Who do you think should be considered the favorite to win the Super Bowl this year?
Well, listen, I always say, like, when you always got to give the defending champs the benefit of the doubt, and I think the Patriots have gotten better.
Really?
Last year, I think yes. I think defensively they're going to be an elite defense this year. Offensively, they get Josh Gordon back, Demaryius Thomas to go along with Julian Edelman. They have the ground and pound running game. We saw that towards the end of the year. So I think this Patriots team is going to be better. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, is going to be better. Patrick Mahomes is going to be in his second full-time season. So imagine how great this guy's going to be. They changed defensive coordinators. They add the Honey Badger, Frank Clark to that defense. So, listen, I think those two teams, to me, are the teams to beat in the AFC.
Well, that's what I believe. I mean, I say this: it's a two-team race in the AFC, and you know what it may come down to, Woody, actually, is who has home field advantage. It didn't help the Chiefs last year, although, again, most people thought they should have won that game. But if you give the Patriots home field advantage in Foxborough, that's going to be tough, and maybe a new and improved Chiefs team. I don't see any other team in the AFC as presently constructed being able to contend with either the Chiefs or the Patriots.
Well, listen, that's the old saying of, well, that's why they play the game.
Right.
That's why we got to see what's going to happen, because you never know what happened on the football field. But I'll tell you what, those two teams, they're really talented. They're coached up really well. And listen, I think it's the Patriots and the Chiefs, and then everyone else is slightly below that, the other contending teams.
NFL analyst Damien Woody joined us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Michael Eaves in for Stephen A. today on a Thursday as we get set for the opening night of the 100th NFL season. Packers-Bears coming up later tonight. I do want to ask you one more thing about the Chiefs, though, because they've got a game against the Jags in their opening weekend, and that stands out to you for a particular reason, Woody. Why is that?
Well, listen, it's obviously opening week, and it's down in Jacksonville. Let me tell you something. Playing in that Florida heat where the humidity is high, that's a tough chore. And then you got to go up. You're Patrick Mahomes, and you got that high-flying offense, but you're going up against one of the best defenses in the National Football League in Jacksonville. So that, to me, is a very, very intriguing game in week one.
In the quarterback situation, what will be revealed in that game about the Jacksonville quarterback situation?
Well, listen, you have what I call a competent quarterback situation with Nick Foles,
right.
A guy who you feel like he'll take care of the football, because that's really been the biggest issue with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has championship pedigree, and he knows how to take care of the football.
So much attention on the Browns for obvious reasons. One, you've got two players in particular that are lightning rods for attention and oftentimes controversy. That, of course, is Odell Beckham Jr., and that is Baker Mayfield. And now they join forces. And from an overall football standpoint, you could see why they would work. But Baker's been talking so much noise, as he has in his entire career, even go back to Oklahoma, so he is still on brand in that regard. How do you think the expectations and the attention will impact the Browns season?
Well, I think that, to me, that's the most intriguing thing about the Cleveland Browns, because for so long, the Cleveland Browns were the hunters. They were searching for relevance. But now you look at what's transpired this offseason. They traded for Odell Beckham Jr. Okay, they elevated Freddie Kitchens to the head coach. They got all the pieces in place. Jarvis Landry, David Njoku at tight end, Nick Chubb at running back, Kareem Hunt when he comes back off suspension, and then the defense, all the pieces on defense. So now you're in a position, if you're the Cleveland Browns, where you're the hunted, because guess what? That's all we've been talking about this offseason is the expectation of the Cleveland Browns and how good this team could possibly be. I want to see how they handle the expectations.
Right, because it's one thing to talk whatever, right? And I'm all about guys being confident in who they are, and I understand the whole us versus the world mentality, and sometimes that leads you to say some sideways kind of stuff, which Baker Mayfield has obviously done over the last several months, maybe a year or so. But again, until you show somebody who you really are, it's all conjecture. You can say, we're going to be this, we're going to do this. Every team says that. All 32 teams at the beginning of the season, Damien, will tell you what they're about to do. But until you do it, you're still the team that we thought you were, the one that you showed us before. So how much different can it be in Cleveland just because you have OBJ there?
Well, yeah, exactly. You're making my point. Listen, a lot of people have kind of anointed the Cleveland Browns already without them actually going out there and making it happen on the field. Listen, they made a huge jump last year. I think they went 7-8-1. Mm-hmm. They were right on the doorsteps of the playoffs, but it's a different animal when you're a team that's hunted. Okay, we've heard players this offseason talking about there's noise that's been said about the Cleveland Browns. So when these players and these teams go up against the Browns, it's going to be a totally different scenario, and that's why they're going to be on primetime a lot this year.
Yeah, I think most people would say the Browns probably should beat the Titans in this game, but even Mayfield saying that the Browns receivers should be licking their chops for a one-on-one coverage. They see it from that Titans defense. So that right there, if you play in the secondary in Nashville, already said you're even more hyped for this game because of what the guy on the other side is talking. Let me take you to a couple other places because you mentioned OBJ. He's one of several new faces in new places, right? Or excuse me, old faces in new places. You've got OBJ in Cleveland. You got Nick Foles in Jacksonville. We talked. About Le'Veon Bell with the Jets, Antonio Brown in Oakland. Big news about him. We're going to ask you about in a moment. But which one of these new faces in a different place are you really looking forward to seeing?
For me, it's Le'Veon Bell.
Okay.
I think people have forgotten how good this guy is. Remember, this is a guy that right now has the most scrimmage yards per game in NFL history. That's more than the great Jim Brown. So he's been on. We didn't see him all of 2018. So this guy is fresh. He got a new contract. He's feeling good, and I think he's just ready to tear it up and remind everybody that look, I'm the best all-around back in the National Football League.
What do you think of the fact that between his last game with the Steelers, which was a playoff game following the 2017 season, and his first game with the Jets, more than 604 days will have passed, I believe, if my math is correct, and he tells Adam Gase he wants to overload him with the ball. Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Do you think that's a good idea for the Jets in game one?
Absolutely. This guy is fresh. He didn't have any tread on the tire from 2018. So this is a guy, he's going to be searching up contact. This is a big back that can go out there and run routes like a
what your thoughts are on Antonio Brown. Big news today. I'll ask you about that here in a second. But should the Rams be considered the favorite in the NFC, considering they went to the Super Bowl last season? You said that the Patriots should be the favorite in the AFC because they're defending champs, but it's the Saints who have the better odds, according to Vegas, to go back. And also, Dame, if you go back to the NFC title game, people believe that, the Saints were better than the Rams. So who do you think should be the favorite in the NFC?
Well, listen, I know a lot of people are trending towards the New Orleans Saints. It seems like the past couple of years they've had bad luck, whether it was the miracle catch against the Minnesota Vikings that knocked them out, or last year the pass interference penalty against the Los Angeles Rams. But I'm actually picking the Dallas Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl in the NFC.
Whoa, come on now. Now, this is the Stephen A. Smith show, right? I'm filling in for Stephen A. today, but this is still his show.
Hey, listen, I know the first thing he will say to me is, that's just blasphemous that I'm picking the Dallas Cowboys. But listen, I feel like when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, their team, I feel like Dak Prescott last year when Amari Cooper came over the trade, we saw the numbers jump up big time for Dak Prescott. We know what Zeke Elliott means to that team. I think no back means more to his team than Zeke Elliott. the way he controls the clock, he keeps the defense fresh. The Dallas Cowboys defense is a very good, elite defense, in my opinion. So everything is there for the Dallas Cowboys, along with the other teams we talk about in the NFC, whether you talk about the Los Angeles Rams, the New Orleans Saints. The Dallas Cowboys, to me, is right there, and I'm picking them to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Damien Woody coming on the Stephen A. Smith Show when Stephen A.'s not here to proclaim the Cowboys to come out of the NFC and go to the Super Bowl.
I told him on First Take today. So, of course, he almost had a heart attack in the chair, but I'm sticking with my pick.
Hey, that's why you are Damien Woody. You don't put stuff out there unless you believe it. All right, so
that's right.
So now we got to get to the big story of the day, and I put this off purposely with you, Damien, because I wanted to get all that other stuff away in terms of I wanted your perspective on all things NFL, but then I know we're going to have to come back to Antonio Brown. If you're just joining the program, if you haven't been on social media, Adam Schefter reporting that Antonio Brown and general manager Mike Mayock got into it Wednesday, clearly over the social media post by Antonio Brown with the fine letter, and the Raiders are now planning to suspend their star wide receiver prior to their Week 1 matchup. That's according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. So, Damien Woody, when you hear the fact that the Raiders are planning to suspend Antonio Brown before Week 1, what is the thing that comes to your mind first? Woody, you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. Listen.
Go ahead.
The question was about Antonio Brown and this whole suspension. Listen, this doesn't it shouldn't surprise anyone. We're talking about the same Antonio Brown who went AWOL last year when the Steelers needed him most in Week 17 and to go to the playoffs. Okay, this is the thing that really trips me out. A lot of these teams. They try to go acquire a mercurial player, thinking that once we get him in our building, that he'll change. This is who Antonio Brown is. Listen, the talent is undeniable. He's maybe the best wide receiver of our generation. But what comes with that is a lot of the baggage, and we saw the baggage with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and now it's transpiring with the Oakland Raiders. You traded for him, you gave him picks. And then on top of that, you gave him a new contract. So I always say when you give somebody money, they're going to reveal more of who they are with the money. So if you're the Oakland Raiders, you're in a particular situation now because you've given this guy all this money. What are you going to do? There's not much you really can do besides suspend him, and that's, according to Adam Schefter, that's what they're going to do.
All right, so let me ask you this, and I agree with you. We see this across all sports, actually. You have a player who had issues in a certain organization, but another team believes that they can change him or be the place where he can be a different person. All right, that is very common across professional sports in particular and also in college athletics. So let me ask you this. If you were John Gruden and you were Mike Mayock and you were considering bringing Antonio Brown to Oakland, what type of conversations would you have had prior to making sure that he is a good fit for your organization? It's not just talking to him and maybe his agent. What are you doing to find out if this dude indeed can be a positive influence in your organization?
Well, listen, for me, what I would do, it's not necessarily about having a conversation with the guy. It's what have your actions shown me? Okay, you're Mike Mayock, you're John Gruden. You're trying to instill a certain culture with the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders have been down for a long time now. And one of the first things that Mike Mayock talked about when he became general manager is how he wanted to instill a certain culture, a winning culture, a culture that's accountable to one another. But then you go out there and you acquire Antonio Brown. And granted, listen, Antonio Brown is one of the hardest working guys on the field. He has a legendary work ethic on the field. But all the other baggage that comes with Antonio Brown, that goes into the face of what you've been preaching about as far as the type of culture you're trying to instill in Oakland. So this whole thing is just mind-boggling to me.
Damien Woody joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPNU. Michael Eaves filling in for Stephen A. today. Clearly there was a clash of personalities, probably even ego. And to your earlier point, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that John Gruden and Mike Mayock's ego told them that they could handle Antonio Brown. Whose ego do you think has been the biggest clash for Antonio Brown in Oakland? Is it Gruden or is it Mayock?
Well, I think it's Mayock. Listen, John Gruden has raved for years about Antonio Brown, the player, Antonio Brown with the legendary work ethic. But when you talk to Mike Mayock, he talks a lot about the Patriot way, the way that the Patriots run their organization, the accountability that they have within their organization. So that would be, in my opinion, that would be bucking the trend of what type, bringing in Antonio Brown, that would be bucking the trend of what he's trying to instill there in Oakland. So that's why we're seeing all of this transpire between, Mike Mayock and Antonio Brown, because they just come from two different worlds.
So how did it even get to this point? And that's why I asked you that earlier question. If you're Mike Mayock and you know who you are, and you're John Gruden and you know who you are, I just feel like there had to be some more due diligence done and maybe more man-on-man conversations with Antonio Brown and say, look, dog, this is what we've heard about you in Pittsburgh. If that is you, fine. We are not going to accept that nonsense here in Oakland. Can you tell me face-to-face that you are cool with what we have trying to establish here going forward? If you can't, that's fine. But tell me face-to-face that you're that dude. Now, granted, Antonio Brown could have said all the right things. I get it. But you will know. You have a pretty good feeling, Damien, when someone is lying to your face. If someone's just trying to sell you on something to get a certain place. And I just don't feel as if, I'm speculating here, but my gut tells me that Mayock and Gruden maybe didn't have the conversation with AB. They thought by coming there it would be different because those two dudes are there.
Well, listen, I go back to what did the actions tell you?
Right. I saw them with you. So if the actions say we need to have a conversation, that's my point. Everything that AB's done in his career says, yo, you don't have to talk because this is what I believe. This is what I've been told. I need the truth from you right now.
Well, Michael, think about this. I don't even know if I would even have to have a conversation. If I'm trying to instill a culture, okay, an accountable culture, a culture where everyone falls in line, do I really want a guy as talented as Antonio Brown is? Do I really want a guy who basically quit on his team in Week 17 when his team needed him the most?
It depends on who you are. That's the problem, though, Damon. It depends on which team you are. Because, look, from a business standpoint, the Raiders needed Antonio Brown, right? They're about to leave Oakland. They're going to Vegas. This is bigger than this 2019 season with this signing. It's about going forward, sure, but it's also having a star marquee player to market that team around when you go to Las Vegas. Let's be real.
Listen, absolutely. All these type of decisions have to be weighed, and now we see what the Oakland Raiders are going through, and this is part of the repercussions of making this type of decision. This is what you have to deal with.
Okay, so let's say, as Adam Schefter is reporting, that this suspension goes through, and he is sat down for Game 1. What impact do you think it will have on Antonio Brown?
What else is the Oakland Raiders going to do? He's still going to get his money. Okay, he might miss a game check this week, but he's still got $30 million guaranteed.
I know, right?
$30 million guaranteed. So I don't know how much is going to affect Antonio Brown that much.
Right. But again, no one has ever told Antonio Brown no. And maybe this is the first time that it's happened to him in such a public setting, and we'll see if it has any impact whatsoever. But clearly, Mike Mayock, maybe John Gruden on his side as well, I would assume they are not having this Antonio Brown nonsense to start their 2019 season. Damien Woody, appreciate the time, man. We'll see you on NFL Live, First Take, SportsCenter, all them shows pretty soon, dog. Appreciate it.
All right, no problem.
All right, so, again, Antonio Brown. What's your take? 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Did the Raiders actually make a mistake by bringing him in? Because everyone is saying today that who didn't see this coming? Well, maybe the Raiders didn't see it coming because how did they get to this point if they did? That's all coming up next here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Michael Eaves in for Stephen A. on this Thursday. Hey, if you're sending your kid off to college this fall, remember there's one thing college students need more than books or pencils or instant noodles, and that's money. And if Ezekiel Elliott knew his worth, if the Dallas Cowboys knew Zeke's worth, why did it take all this time? Why did they waste everyone's time getting to this point? What was it really for? Now, what NFL Twitter's been saying today, sports media, folks, we were going to talk about the Cowboys regardless because they're the Cowboys. Same way we talk about the Patriots. Same way we talk about all the great teams and all the great leagues. We talk about the star players and the star franchises. We were going to talk about Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott and that Dallas Cowboys squad regardless of this situation with Ezekiel Elliott. So if you really think they got a certain amount of money worth of advertisement and attention out of Zeke holding out and waiting to the last week, you're fooling yourselves. That's not how it works. We talk about stars. You talk about stars. That's who you talk about on social media. That's who you call into sports talk radio shows and talk about. That's what you tune into for television. We talk about stars. The Cowboys are one of the star franchises in all of sports. We were going to talk about them going into the season. We were going to say how they were the favorite to win the NFC East, and if things fall right, maybe they can go to the Super Bowl. We were going to be having those exact same conversations. But as it related to when or whether Ezekiel Elliott was going to sign a contract, Cowboys just wasted everybody's time. They wasted their fans' time. They wasted local media's time. They wasted their teammates' time because the teammates had to answer questions about Ezekiel Elliott on the regular. They just wasted everybody's time because the inevitable happened. The best player in the league has the richest contract at his position. That's what happened. Now, as I promised, we're going to talk more about the contract specifically with Josina coming up later because, you know, it's 6-7 years, could be $100+ million, da-da-da. The only numbers that really matter, as we know, in current NFL contract talk is the guaranteed money. $50 million for Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley with 45.
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
All right, family, bottom of the hour here, 2:30 on the East Coast, 11:30 a.m. out west. Michael Lee's in for Stephen A. today, ESPN Radio, ESPNU. Taking your phone calls, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Again, the big story today, the Raiders going to suspend Antonio Brown after he got into an argument with general manager Mike Mayock. That's according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. ESPN's Josina Anderson also reporting that argument, that dust-up happened on the practice field in front of teammates. According to The Athletic, Brown had to be restrained by some of his teammates during that exchange. And according to NFL Network, the actual confrontation never got physical because players got in between them, but NFL Network says that Brown said that he would punch Mayock in the face, and then he punted a ball, telling Mayock to fine him for that. See, now it's starting to be funny. Now we're starting to get Real Housewife drama here. I'll punch you in the face. Punt ball away from said general manager. He's going to punch in the face. Fine me for that. This is what this whole thing has become. It's become a soap opera for Oakland. The last thing they need going into this particular season, their last one in the Bay Area before moving to Vegas, they've got drama. So as you might expect, once this news started coming out, Adam Schefter and everyone started getting wind of it, there was a lot of attention now on the Raiders for Mike Mayock to come out and say something publicly. Well, he held a press conference moments ago, and this is that press conference in its entirety.
Antonio Brown's not in the building today. He won't be practicing. I don't have any more information for you right now. And when I have some and it becomes appropriate, you guys all get it. I promise you. But that's it for today. Thank you.
That was the entire press conference. That was it. He came out to basically say what we already knew through reporting from Adam Schefter, Josina Anderson, and others. He's not with the team. He's not going to practice. Don't know what else is going to happen. Could be a 1-game suspension. Could be a 2-game suspension. Could be a 4-game suspension because that's the maximum allowed under the collective bargaining agreement for conduct detrimental to the team. So the Raiders could do that. You know what else they could do based on conduct detrimental to the team? they could suspend him for a game and then cut him, and they would not owe him one penny of his guaranteed money. Antonio Brown could literally lose $30 million for this. $30 million. Because of all this nonsense. This could happen. But so many people are not shocked by this. Right? Most of you, I'm about to go through the phone calls. I know that you guys, we knew this was going to happen. This is who he is, blah, blah, blah. But one guy who was probably saying this before anybody is one of our colleagues here at ESPN, but also a former teammate of Antonio Brown, and that is Ryan Clark. He was on SportsCenter earlier today, right after this news broke, and this was Ryan Clark reminding folks of who Antonio Brown really is.
I remember I took a lot of heat last year when I came out, and I said he's always been this dude, and now you're just starting to see it, and everybody would see his smile and kind of his charisma and the way he was engaging in that personality and think that meant he was a good teammate, that meant he was a good dude. And I would always say that that's not who he is. And now he's reached a point in his life, in his career, where he's tired of hiding these things from the public or the people he works with. And obviously the Raiders thought that they could have a culture that would help him not be that same person, but we're seeing now that they were wrong.
That was Ryan Clark earlier today, reminding everyone what he had been saying about Antonio Brown for quite some time. And as I said on this show earlier, people liked Antonio Brown, the character. He was successful on the field. He helped your fantasy team. He would smile. He would joke. He would have fun. He'd show up to training camp in wild rides, whether it be a fire truck, a hot air balloon in the Bay Area this year. People love the character of Antonio Brown. But what Ryan Clark has been saying for quite some time, that's not the true Antonio Brown. And the Steelers would probably tell you that's not the true Antonio Brown based on how his tenure in Pittsburgh ended. This whole Antonio Brown drama. I will say this, though. If you want to talk about something good relative to the NFL, I'm all here for that, too. If you're telling me you're excited about tonight's game because you want to see what Mitchell Trubisky and the Bears are going to do after a standout season last year against Aaron Rodgers and a new coach in Matt LaFleur, Aaron Rodgers didn't play a preseason game. If you want to talk about that, fine. If you want to tell me that you think the Rams should be the favorite in the NFC over the Saints, despite Vegas saying the Saints should be the favorite, I'll listen to that. If you want to tell me that Pat Mahomes is going to win a second straight NFL MVP, I'm here for that. I'll take anything good. If you want to talk NFL today, we're on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Hey, what's going on? Bull crap. He's not tolerating nothing, and I love it. Third point, Antonio Brown needs to get his stuff together.
What does that mean, though? What does that mean exactly?
Okay. As far as we've been through it with the foot and with the helmet and all that stuff. Okay, that's fine. Mike Mayock needed to take that stand because everybody thought he was soft the first time when he came out and said either you all in or all out.
Right.
But I hope he joined the team. Now Mike Mayock is saying, hey, look, I don't care if you're a star player or anything. You're going to get fined. We're trying to change the culture. I think Mike Mayock is sticking to that. He's talked to John Gruden. And Mike Mayock is the general manager. Don't just sit here and say, hey, John Gruden rules it all. No. Mike Mayock came in for a reason.
If you were trying – but hold on. Rodney, let me ask you this. If you were Mike Mayock and your directive this season was to change the culture, create a new winning culture, everyone on the same page, all going forward, no nonsense, why would you bring in Antonio Brown in the first place?
That's a good question. But
right?
What
I'm saying is, Rodney, hold on, Rodney. My point is, it's easy to say now that what they're trying to do is create a culture. But if we go back and see what they actually did, which was sign Antonio Brown of all people, it would appear as if it wasn't about creating a certain culture. It was about two things: making a splash from a marketing standpoint for the city, moving to Vegas potentially, and then trying to win games because he would give you the best opportunity to do that. So we can talk about culture all we want to, but if that's the case, they wouldn't have signed Antonio Brown.
And I understand that, and I didn't agree. I'm not on the national stage. I agree with everything. I did not want Antonio Brown.
Okay.
Like they said, Antonio Brown fell into their lap.
He didn't fall. He didn't just fall into their lap. I mean, they had to give us some things to get him, and they had to pay him the money. Now, granted, they can get out of the money if they suspend him right now, but still, he didn't just fall into their lap. Like they made a point to get him as well. Rodney, I appreciate the time. Again, the Raiders aren't innocent in this. Don't feel sorry for the Raiders right now. There's no reason to do that. If you're John Gruden, Mike Mayock, you knew what this was. You knew how this was going to play out. Come on. Let's be real. Let's go to Cameron in Indiana. And Cameron, I hope I'm not going to regret this phone call, but you were on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Yeah, man. I guarantee you Antonio Brown's going to end up as the new Colin Kaepernick. I give it 30 days.
What does that mean?
What it means is for different reasons, he will be not in the league anymore, and no one will want to draft him or have him on the roster.
So effectively, you're saying that Antonio Brown would be blackballed from the NFL. No one will give him an opportunity to play on their team, clearly for different reasons than Colin Kaepernick, but you believe this is his last chance. If the Raiders cut him, no other team would sign him.
Yeah, why would they want the drama, man?
Hey, look, you can make the argument, Cameron, I appreciate the call. You could clearly make that argument. Is Antonio Brown worth the drama? Now, again, the analogy against Colin Kaepernick is not fair, completely different reasons, but I understand the premise of your statement is that teams aren't willing to give Colin Kaepernick a chance because of the backlash that team would unquestionably get from a certain portion of society, okay? That's the reason they wouldn't bring him in. So other NFL teams are going to look at Antonio Brown to say to his teammates, to his coaching staff, to his front office, because of that, why will we bring that in? That is a legitimate question for any team out there, because all this stuff that has happened, all other 31 teams, let's say 30, because Steelers clearly not going to mess with him anymore, they've seen this whole thing play out. So why would they? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they still think they can win with him. And teams are always going to be arrogant. They're always going to believe they're the ones that could make a change. And you know one team that might be? The New England Patriots. If you're Bill Belichick and you can get Antonio Brown on the cheap, because if his contract gets voided, he'll be trying to get any money, right? If you can get him on the cheap and you could cut him and be no big deal, hell yeah, you'd bring him in. Come on, don't even try me with that one. Of course they would. The only question is, are the Raiders actually going to cut him and he become a free agent? Take more of your phone calls. Coming up next, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. You can also hit me on Twitter at Michael Eaves. Hey, do you have a frequent heartburn problem, like the kind where you have antacids stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I mean. You keep them in your bag, your desk, your car, your nightstand. You have those chalky tablets ready for whenever and wherever heartburn strikes. Well, listen up. There's an easier way to deal with your heartburn. Prilosec OTC. Just one pill a day with at least, he missed a walkthrough on August 22nd. He'd already fined him some money for missing something earlier. But instead of just one, I don't know why he would post it on social media other than the fact that he's Antonio Brown. But then this is what he says on the post, Josina. And Antonio Brown says this: when your own team want to hate, but there's no stopping me now. Devil is a lie. Everyone got to pay this year, so we clear. What is this fool doing?
So, first of all, I'm sure Mike Mayock is looking at that message like, wait a minute, so I'm hating now?
Exactly.
I'm hating? Okay, so that's one. And then number two, he's like, wait a minute, who's the devil in this equation? Am I the devil?
Yeah. And who's lying?
Number two.
Where are the lies
it's
in this letter?
It's like, right, and then it's like number three. I am the one that's trying to give you $30+ million in guarantees, right? So, like, wait a minute, what is going on here? What I think is very potentially sad about the situation is that you hope that this doesn't create a significant rift between him and the general manager, or is the beginning of a rift that, can widen, because obviously nobody appreciates being put on blast. Obviously, although Antonio Brown, to his, side, felt like he doesn't understand where those fines are coming from, because if you watch Hard Knocks, you can tell that he feels like there's a rapport between him and John Gruden, and John is expressing to him that he understands what he went through with the helmet controversy. He's behind him. They seem on the same page. The helmet issue seems behind him. He just got a big endorsement. Everything seems behind him. And then it's like, wow, then you mollywop me with this, these fines. So where is that coming from?
Right.
But at the same time, this is coming from a GM that had previously already set an ultimatum about him needing to get this issue done and taken care of and starting to show up. And at the same time, a GM who's trying to set a precedent in his first year of tenure of general manager in terms of how he's handling star behavior. Now, do those fines sometimes get waived, Michael?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Of course you do.
Remember when Marshawn Lynch held out, the Seattle Seahawks waived his fines. So Antonio maybe thought he was going to get the same treatment and obviously did not.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
All right, folks, we're just about done here on the Stephen A. Smith Show today. Michael Lee's in for Stephen A. He'll be back tomorrow live from Dallas. Of course, the big story today, Antonio Brown likely going to be suspended and potentially even cut by the Raiders, which is hysterical in so many regards when you really think about it. Let's go back to your phone lines. I only have a few minutes to try to get to as many as we can. Let's start with Ray in Texas. Ray, you're on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys do a great job. I'll try to be quick with this, and I'm going to give you some grown man Bible. Check this out, man. Listen, a fool and his money will soon part, but the reality of the whole thing is, man, your synopsis, soliloquy of cutting him, give him 4 games, cut his money. We're not going to give him that loophole to jump through. This is just who he is. Oh, woe is this, woe is that. I live up here in Texas. I pulled myself up from the bootstrap. He's ungrateful. He's toxic. He's a person. Hey, man, who throws toys off and almost kills a child? Who drives down a highway 100 miles an hours and puts everyone else at risk? Who throws a sweet kid like Juju Smith under the bus? Why would you do that to Ryan Clark? I just have to, and I'm a diehard Steeler fan. I'm not angry. I'm relieved that guy out of football. He's affecting his own fraternity's money. There's young men like Derek Carr. They're depending on him. Hey, look, man.
Hey, Ray, I got to cut you off, man. I got to cut you off, so I got to go. I understand what you're saying. Maybe the suspension will be the wake-up call, as I said earlier. Maybe it's more than 1 game or 2 games. But if you were the Raiders, why would you put up with an entire $30 million headache if you don't have to? Charles, California, you're on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Yeah, I'm a former Raider player, and I'm not going to give you my name. The Raiders are never going to be any thing since we played when Marcus and us left the Raiders. Number one, my hat is off to AB, and I can tell you the situation why he left Pittsburgh, which I don't blame him. Coming to the Raiders, as you said, what I like about you as an announcer, this is about business and money. They're moving to Vegas. They need tickets. They need to fill the stands. AB has that kind of personality. For those that have never been in an NFL locker room, they have no idea what possibly went on, what led up to that whole coach. Those guys are not buying into what he's saying. This is about money because they're moving to Vegas. They need to fill the stands. My hat is off to AB. Why? I would do what Le'Veon did, sit out a year. They tried to say Ben was the man. They didn't even make the playoffs. The man sat out a year, got his money. If they were trying to win and get the chip, they would have gave Le'Veon that money.
Hey, Charles, I got to let you go, man. We're up against the clock. I appreciate your context, your perspective. He's clearly not going to back down. I mean, that's obvious. That's who he is, and all the success that he has achieved. However, there still is a right and wrong way to do something. And AB oftentimes picks the wrong way. Even if you have been wronged, you don't have to respond in the wrong way. And that's been the history of Antonio Brown, and it may